Hello friends, it's Simone. I'm here to film the final video for my October project 2024. It is a gray morning and I'm filming with natural light. I just tried the overhead ring light and it's so artificial that I am going to go with what this is. I have finished all 31 days of my October project, which was to swatch an ink sample and fill a pen every day in the month of October. And I had a good time, but I am ready to move on. These are the 7 pens that I want to talk about in this video, and then I want to talk about my favorites in terms of inks and pens and what my rating system, how that worked out, because I noticed some things that I would like to talk about. So I used a Leonardo Momento Zero Grande with a number 8 titanium nib. I used a Montegrappa Elmo in the marshmallow finish with a medium nib. This one is also a medium nib. Then I used a Lamy All-Star with a gold nib. I used the Platinum 3776 in black with rhodium trim and a reverse architect nib ground by Kirk Spear. I used an Esterbrook Estie in honeycomb with a regular medium nib, steel as well. Then I used this Fonte fountain pen that was included in my stationery selection box. I swapped out the nib, and this is an extra fine Nemosine nib that I purchased from Birmingham Pen Co. And then the last pen that I'm using today is the Sailor Pro Gear Imperial Black with a medium nib. The first pen last Friday, October 25, was this Leonardo Momento Zero Grande in Primary Manipulation Light. I purchased this pen at the San Francisco Pen Show 2024. I instantly fell in love. I saw the pens from far away, walked over there, checked them out. I saw that they had this humongous nib, and I was able to try the titanium nib in medium size, and I fell in love. And so this was a very quick decision to buy this pen. So I filled it with Kobe number 57 Hydrangea. There is something about this color that makes me want to add a bottle to my collection right away. I was very hesitant to put it into a pen, but I found the perfect pairing. The flow in this Momento Zero Grande is just amazing. The amount of ink that is put on the page is out of this world. I was anticipating the filling of this pen, and man, I'm not disappointed. In fact, I'm hoping to pick up another Momento Zero Grande with a titanium fine nib at the 2025 Pen Show. It makes me so happy to use the pen. It feels great in my hand. The piston is so smooth. I gave this ink a 10, the flow a 10, the pen a 10, and it definitely made me want to rethink my whole pen collection because it just makes me feel so happy when I'm using this pen. The second pen I used this past week is this Montegrappa Elmo in marshmallow with a medium steel nib. I filled it with Waterman Tender Purple. Oh, haha, I start every paragraph with O. Man, I love this ink. I might have added it to cart already. The flow of the Jowo nib is awesome. For some reason, this nib in this pen feels better than the same nib in a different pen. Also, Perfectly balanced pen in my hand. I will absolutely ignore that the cap does not seal well and water evaporates and darkens the ink. I love how this feels in my hand. So good. I will let you know later on. I have the Estie. For some reason, Jowo nibs feel different in this pen, and I'm still wondering why that is. Maybe it's because it's balanced differently. There is some metal in the body of this pen back here. I hope you can see this. That is not in an Estie, and this makes this whole pen, even though they look so similar, feel different in my hand when I write with it. I gave the ink a 10, I gave the flow a 10, I gave the pen a 10. That was 2 3-10 days in a row. Then I used this Lamy All-Star Bronze with a broad 14 karat gold nib. This is actually rose gold. It does not have a breather hole. The 14 karat regular gold nibs do. And I filled it with Anderillium Tolype Moth Warm. I don't think this color will stand out more than other colors in this realm I've already used. Does not wow me. Not at all, just not more than others. The flow in this pen is amazing, but I think that's more connected to the ink than the pen. The Lamy All-Star is a good, reliable pen, but it's not a fiery love as it is with the Leonardo Momento Zero Grande. The ink I gave a 5, the flow a 10, the pen an 8, and I think, well, I will talk about this later, but I was more open to give points for inks between 0 and 10 than I was for pens. We will get to this later, but that's just something that I noticed. And I think depending on how I felt about a pen the previous day, I gave pens different ratings throughout the month. And it was easier to give ratings, more reliable, less biased ratings to the inks, in my opinion, at least, than to the pens. Then on Monday, October 28th, I think Mondays are cursed. I put Birmingham Pen Co. Pennsylvania Fieldstone into this Platinum 3776 in black with rhodium trim. This was a broad nib, and it has been ground into a reverse architect nib by Kirk Spear. Okay. The ink is nice, but I don't know. No wow factor with this one either. It's not an ink I want to use. Might just be the lightness of it. I do love the swatch. That's some drama right there. I'm not sure the pen is for me though. The ink has great flow, but Platinum just doesn't seem the brand for me. I might sell it just to recoup some money. This is a nice smooth architect though. Maybe instead of reverse architects, I need to get some regular ones. This was really a disappointment, and I think what played into this disappointment was that I again put a very light ink into an actually very fine pen. I have noticed in this project that inks seem to be much lighter in Platinum pens than in other pens. I'm going to show it to you here one more time. This is Pilot Iroshizuku Momiji in the Platinum 3776 extra fine with a monoline nib grind on it. This is the same ink in a Sailor Pro Gear Slim with a fine nib. The line width looks almost identical, but the colors are completely different, and this ink is much lighter here. Here it is the same thing on Tomoe River paper, just as a comparison. And so if I had some brain, but I actually matched pens and inks before I started this project, so I only realized that this was going to happen after I had already matched pens and inks. So I probably shouldn't have matched this pen and this ink in the first place. But I also might just not enjoy how dry these pens are, and I don't think it has anything to do with the nib. It might just be the feed or just the general pen, the pen in general. And because I really love when a pen is very wet, this just didn't do it for me. I don't know if I said it before, I gave the ink a 5, gave the flow a 9, I gave the pen a 7. And I think so many people love Pennsylvania Fieldstone that it might be controversial to give this ink a fine, but I just didn't vibe with it as much as I would have liked. And I think that's totally okay. This is just how this is. Not every pen, not every ink vibes with every person in the same way. Then I filled this Esterbrook Estie in honeycomb with Dominant Industry Winter Wood. This has a medium steel nib. Oh, I need to put here diamine walnut. Either my diamine walnut swatch was watered down or Dominant Industry Winter Wood is just so much darker. I thought I'd like such a dark brown ink, but actually I prefer the reddish undertones in walnut more. I like the color match with the pen. I love how the dark of the Winter Wood brings out the dark flecks in this honey amber cracked resin. The flow is okay, not wet, and since the nib feels a bit scratchy, it's not a great experience. I do love the Esties in general, and this one in particular. It comes in second after Funky Lake. I'm just not sure I need so many. I have 3 things to ponder in the next months. I gave the ink a 7, the flow a 7, the pen an 8. The longer I look at this, the more I actually like it now. When I look at this writing, it feels very welcoming. So maybe that was just the first impression that I didn't really vibe with Winterwood, but even though it looks so much lighter here, diamine walnut is a great alternative to Winterwood. So I don't plan on adding Dominant Industry Winterwood to my collection because I have diamine walnut. All right, Wednesday, October 30th, I filled this Fonte fountain pen. And I would call this gray. Here you can see. Pay attention to the finials because they are hilarious. With the extra fine Nemesine nib, I just pulled those out. The nib that I originally got on there wasn't the greatest. It felt super scratchy. And so I thought, what could I do with this? And so I found these nibs and tried them. It was just an experiment and I wanted to see how this whole thing writes. I filled it with Birmingham Pen Co. Smokebox. A gray that is interesting when it dries, but not when it is dry. None of my bottled grays feel threatened by it. The flow is okay. I'm so confused by this pen. It is so much better with the Nemesine nib and feels so nice in my hand. What is more annoying than having a flat top at the cap but a rounded finial at the end of the barrel? It is irritating. Now, what to do with those thoughts and feelings? Yeah, I gave the ink a 6, I gave the flow an 8, and I gave the pen a 7. This is where my discrepancy comes in because I would not rate this pen the equal to Where was a 7? Oh, actually, well, maybe I would. See, I'm going to talk about this later because it's interesting. And then last day, I filled the Sailor Pro Gear Imperial Black with a medium 21 karat gold nib. This was my first Sailor Pro Gear, and in a medium nib, and I loved it. Just, man, this nib, this pen feels great. I might have made an impulse purchase because I had filled this pen today. And I filled it with Scribo Grigio. And I have only a very, very short paragraph. I need a bottle of this ink. Even though it is called gray, this is what I want in a lighter shade of teal or so. I can't even put into words what I love about this ink. It's just so good. The flow in this pen is amazing, and I just love it. Like, I don't have more to say. 100% happiness. Something about the matte finish of the Imperial Black makes it just so much better than the other Sailor Pro Gears that I have. It just feels so good. I don't know. Ink 10, flow 10, pen 10. And because I made an impulse purchase, I will not be adding Scribo Grigio right away. But this is an ink on my list that I would like to acquire because I know that I will love it so much. So let's talk about the other things that I thought would be interesting to round out this whole month. First thing I would like to talk about, because this was geared around 31 inks and not 31 pens, is my favorite pens from this month. And I would have to say that those are Kobe number 57 Hydrangea and Scribo Grigio. I think this is even higher. This is a good a mention, but this one was definitely my favorite. And I think it has partly to do with what pen I put it in, because in the writing with the Leonardo Momento Zero Grande, it had a really wet flow. This ink was flowing out of the pen, but also you were able to see those chromo shading bits that you can see here. You were able to see those in the writing as well. And oftentimes when I would use inks that are similar to this in the bluer range, like those blurples, they wouldn't show these amazing properties in the writing sample. But here I used this ink for the very first time with an amazing pen, and of course it left an impression. So other inks that stood out. So I used that on day 25. Scribo Grigio I just filled today, but and I even think it looks great on Tomoe River paper. Here it is. It looks a little bit differently on this mixed media paper. I think it looks stunning on Cosmo Airlight, but also let me grab my Tomoe River notebook. Here on the Tomoe River paper, it looks amazing as well. Other inks that stood out, and you will see nothing that is very surprising. So I have Kobe Hydrangea, Diamine Safari is an olivey green, Anderillium Bandit King Shoemaker Butterfly Blue is a teal, Waterman Tender Purple is a saturated purple, Waringul Kyunghui is a yellow leaning ochre, or it could be a dark yellow, possibly, if that's a thing. And then Diamine Cult Pens Deep Dark Orange. These are all jewel tones. I've been in love with these shades since I started using fountain pens. So when I pulled all of those cards out, I was like, this is not a surprise at all that you would love those colors most. So maybe I just need to accept the fact that I love these jewel tones, that I don't need to hunt for any other inks but those, and supplement them with some interesting inks as well. But this is my color palette. This is where I feel most comfortable with, where I feel at home. And so that's just how it is. Now, let's talk about the lowest pen that I rated. I thought that was also, no, okay, hold on. I'm not there yet. The favorite pen by far was, and I think it's no surprise, the Leonardo Momento Zero Grande. I can just still reiterate that if I had some rational thought about what I like and what I don't like about a pen, I would not have purchased this pen at all. I think the clips are way too short for these pens, but I was just drawn in by the beautiful resin. And then the rest of the pen turned out to be so great. And every time I use this now, it makes me feel something else. It's a different feeling than I have with most of my other fountain pens, which is something that I don't really know how to deal with. Do I just get rid of all the other pens and use this only? I love the piston mechanism. It's so smooth. I love that there is some translucency right here. This is just like everything on this pen is just perfect, except for the clip, of course. So this was my favorite pen. I don't have another one that comes even close to this. But I also have, of course, some pens that stood out. First one was the Lamy 2000 with a medium nib. I just got this medium nib at the beginning of October. I unfortunately filled it with an ink that didn't work well. So I can't wait to fill this with an ink that will give me some better, like more longer writing experiences with this pen, so I can see if it's true that I loved it a lot. Another pen that stood out to me was the Pilot Custom 743. This one has a medium nib. It was just good. Like overall, it felt good. I was reminded why I love Pilot nibs. Great. This Pelikan M800 with a fine 18 karat gold nib is also a pen that makes me just happy when I write with it. Yeah, so when I was thinking about the feelings that I had towards the Leonardo Momento Zero Grande, this was one of the pens that definitely came up, where I'm always feeling elated. Maybe elated is a really good word for the feelings, to describe those feelings. It's not just a fountain pen and it brings joy. It elates those feelings even more. So I had a great time using this, even though the ink in this pen also didn't quite hit the mark for me. And then the other pen that stood out to me and made me make my fine Waterman Corinne reconsider keeping that one. I also received my pre-order for the Waterman Corinne. I have a video up on that of the blah blah. I have a video on my channel about this pen. I ordered it in July. It finally came to me in October. I tried it and I loved it. And even when I filled it with an ink, what was the ink that I filled it with? Birmingham Penco Cherry Blossom. I still really liked it. And it makes me, every time I write with it, it makes me feel something. Same thing, you know? And I also really I love this black finish. It looks so good. Then this one is one that also always surprises me as well. I talked about this just earlier. The Montegrappa Elmo. It is So well balanced for a, not for a steel nib. It's just, it feels perfectly balanced in my hand when I hold it. And as I said before, the steel nib feels different. This is a Jowo number 6 steel nib. I can put this nib on so many pens in my collection, but when I use it in here, it feels different, better. And then the last one that stood out and stands out every time I use it is the Sailor Pro Gear in Imperial Black. I just love how it feels in my hand. So now for inks, flow, and pen. And I picked out all of the pens and ink pairings that had an all 10 rating. 10 for ink, 10 for flow, and 10 for the pen. And that were less pens than I thought there would be. I forgot to pull one of them out, just this one. So the one with a 10-10-10 rating was the Sailor Pro Gear Imperial Black. I gave the ink a 10, which was Scribo Grigio. I gave the flow a 10, and I gave the pen a 10. The Montegrappa Elmo, I gave the Waterman Tender Purple, I gave the ink a 10, I gave the flow a 10, and I gave the pen a 10. Leonardo Momento Zero Grande, I gave filled with Kobe number 57 Hydrangea. I gave the ink a 10, I gave the pen a 10, and I gave the flow a 10. The Bennu Euphoria Jazz filled with Anderillium Bandit King Shoemaker Butterfly Blue. Has a fine nib. I gave the ink a 10, I gave the flow a 10, and I gave the pen a 10. I'm going to put them right here. And then the last pen that I gave all 10s on, and the reason why some of the pens that stood out didn't make it is because the ink wasn't the 10 thing, or sometimes the pen just got a 9. Pilot Custom 743 in Verdigris, filled with Diamine Safari. I gave the ink a 10, I gave the flow a 10, and I gave the pen a 10. So these 5 pens are amazing, I guess, is what it says. Then let's look at the lowest inks the lowest rating I gave to inks. I gave ratings to my inks from 2 all the way to 10. And that is a big range. If I'm having numbers from 0 to 10, then going all the way down to 2 is making sure that I'm using the whole range, which I think is good. So these 2 inks got a 2. I thought I would like the Vinta Blue Blood Dugong Bougat with the red sheen. It says cyan blue in the base color and a red sheen on top. It just didn't wow me at all. And then Teranishi Emotional Olive is just way too light for me, even in this Lamy 2000 with a medium nib. And then the other ink that did not work for me was Papier Plume Moss Green in the Platinum 3776 Extra Fine Monoline. Could be, here it is as a writing sample. It could be that it was the pen. I mentioned that earlier, but I still, you know, it was a 4. So I went 2 inks, got a 2, then a 4, and then I went up other ratings numbers. Let's talk about the lowest pens. So I gave pens. 7 was the lowest and 10 was the highest. So I only used 7, 8, 9, 10. So 4 of my 10 pen rating scale, which means that I need to actually be more open to rate my pens more freely, more negatively. I would consider 5. This is okay, and then everything below 5 is not good. So starting at a 7 just doesn't, you know, cover all the different properties that I have with pens that I like and don't like about pens. So I need to be more open with those. So these two were my 7 pen ratings. In my Platinum 3776 in black with a reverse architect nib, and I'm really tempted to just let this go. I want to try this with another ink and then decide. And then this one is just the most irritating pen ever because it feels so much better than it looks. And yeah, I probably will give this away at some point because it just doesn't really fill any gaps in my collection. And then the other pen that I rated low was an 8, the Platinum 3776 in burgundy. I already sold that pen. So I think deciding to sell these two that are even rated lower than the one that I already sold is probably a good idea. And then let's talk about the highest pen. I gave 10 ratings, the 10 rating to 12 of the pens in here. So that could either mean that I have already found pens that generally work for me and maybe the ink is just not good in this pen. That was 1/3 of these pens got a 10, which I think is quite good. Now, I have gone up from around 33 pens up until the beginning of August, even after the San Francisco Pen Show. Let's see. At the end of, after the San Francisco Pen Show, I had 33 pens, and I'm up now at the end of October with 39 pens. So I had an influx of pens. Quite a few pens came in since then. And I'm trying to, maybe I need to be more strict with how I rate my pens and let some of them go, if that's a goal, if I want to bring the number down. But every time I look at my pen collection, I'm definitely noticing that I have a harder time picking one that I wouldn't want to let go. And the very last topic I was going to talk about today was the highest ink ratings. I gave 9 inks a 10, and even though it's just 3 less than the pens, to me it feels, and that's basically the whole gist of those looking at all of those numbers, it feels like I'm more easily convinced to rate an ink a lower number than a pen. So I'm reiterating the same thing, so I should stop here. Inks, I have been able to use the whole spectrum from 1 to 10. Pens, I've only used 7 to 10. I need to change that really soon in order to find pens that really work for me, because I would like more of those feelings than the, oh, well, that's okay, but why is it in my collection? If that makes sense. So, things I noticed is that I have now pens that work really well with the dry inks. I don't know if this is a dry ink in general, but it's a light ink, which is a similar problem. And the Nagasawa Gierske in the broad nib, the ink flowed really well. I do have more pens that work well with dry inks, and I shouldn't dry and light inks, and I shouldn't rule them out from the beginning. Another thing I noticed is that I really like shimmer inks in parallel pens. I closed this, but I shouldn't have done that. I loved the Winter Lackby in the Custom 74. It is nice, but this is the Custom 74, but I really love it in the Pilot Parallel. I have a bit harder time with this Pilot Parallel Radius pen, but I still really enjoy how shimmery, how much fun you can have with this Pilot Parallel and Shimmer inks. Diamine, always, 99% of those inks are well behaved. And I also feel like there is almost, for every expensive ink that you can get, there is a Diamine ink that is similar. Enough to just get the Diamine ink. I really, really like the ink brand. It's just every time I use them, I never have any complaints. Another thing I noticed, and I talked about this, is the excitement that I have for pens. I would love to have more feelings like this than with this one. So I need to take a really hard look at my pens again and be a little bit more discerning. I also, I don't know if that's just a thing, but as you can clearly see here, none of my favorite pens are maker pens per se. And even though I would love to find a way to support makers, maybe just by sharing them on social media, I have a harder time loving those maker pens than I do with those conventional nibs. And I am more, or taking steps back, I have sold quite a few of the maker pens that I already owned because they don't evoke these feelings here, unfortunately. And then I also found that every sailor pen that I had, I rated a 10. I really love sailor nibs. They work for me. For some reason, that's exactly the feedback, the feeling that I would like to have on paper. The titanium medium nib feels very similar. I think that's the reason why I like it so much, because this is not a boring body by any means, but it's definitely not as flashy and as eye-catching as this one. So yeah, that's all the findings that I have. I hope this video isn't too long, and I hope you stayed all the way. Thank you so much for participating, being part, and following along my October project. I enjoyed it up until the last few days of the month, and I'm ready to move on to November and do something else. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Until then, bye.